Welcome to the Extreme Sports Performance Podcast. My name is Ryan Blake. I'm the founder of Extreme Sports Performance and the host of this show. This podcast exists to explore what actually sustains high-level performance over time in action and adventure sports. Not hype, not shortcuts, and not peak moments taken out of context. Extreme Sports Performance is built around a durability-first approach to performance. We focus on how athletes train, recover, structure seasons and make decisions under fatigue in unpredictable, high-cost environments without sacrificing health, longevity or enjoyment of the sport. The aim of this show is simple: to extract real-world transferable insights from athletes and coaches who have lived the demands of their sport, what worked, what didn't, where things broke down and what ultimately held up over time. In this episode, I'm joined by Nico Kirschstein-Smith. Nico is a very experienced physiotherapist who works in sport, TV, film and theatre. He is also a professional stunt performer. We discuss understanding individual needs, the importance of progressive training, recognising and addressing common mistakes, and the need for a holistic approach to training and recovery. This helps get more clarity on what actually separates athletes who last from those who burn out and plateau. What makes this conversation valuable is not just what Nico has experienced, but how he's had to think about performance, managing load, adapting to unpredictable conditions and building systems that hold up over time rather than chasing short-term peaks. We break down several points where athletes in this space typically break down and what actually supports durability, consistency and long-term progression. This is a practical conversation about what works, what fails and what lasts when performance is tested repeatedly. Right, let's get into it. Nico, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on. Please can you start by giving a brief introduction to who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Nico Kirschstein-Smith. I am a physiotherapist who works in professional sport, TV, film and theatre. I've been incredibly lucky to have worked on multiple tours, national and international, different productions, whether it's TV or film or theatre. And in addition to that, I do emergency and pitch side services. So a whole sort of array of medical services. And in addition to that, as of recently, and probably quite applicable with the work you do, is as of 2025, I have been accepted onto the British Stunt Register. So in addition to the physio work, I also do I work as a stunt performer. So yeah, that's my sort of job. My background is predominantly sport. I've got a big background in most sports, to be honest with you. The main ones to highlight would probably be, or to the highest level, would be judo. I competed nationally, and for kayaking, I competed for Great Britain. Obviously, training for the stunt register made me train even more sports to quite a high level. And again, with all of these different sporting backgrounds, from rugby, football, all the way to your horse riding, horseback archery, gymnastics, trampolining, it's given me a really good insight to helping those that are training for extreme sports, for weekend sports, various different types of injuries. So I can understand the biomechanics of the injury, but more importantly, I can understand the level to which they want to rehab back to. So it gives me a really nice background to help others with regards to physiotherapy.
Awesome. That's a great intro. Thanks for starting off our conversation with that overview. So what would you say in your experience, what environments have placed the highest physical cost on the body over time in your experience and what you've seen?
I think it's very much, you can't generalize it. It's very much holistic down to what the performer, the athlete, the amateur athlete, professional athlete, depending on how strong they are, how well they've got themselves into the state that they need to be in to perform the task that they want to do. There is no one size fits all. It's very much down to them. So when you ask about what's the hardest environment, for a swimmer, it'll be the water. For a hiker, it'll be the mountains. For a skier, it'll be the snow and the conditions in which they're competing. Depending on the event that they're training for, again, it completely comes down to what they're training for and how they've trained to prepare for the environment in which they're going to compete in. I can't give you an answer to that one, being this is the hardest.
You've answered it. So, I mean, we see that more and more these days, don't we? Like general solutions to individualized problems aren't really going to last. And that's why it's so important to make sure what you're giving somebody is specific to where they are, what they're doing, and what they have, and rather than just generally applying something that worked for somebody else. And
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can have the easiest example is, okay, if we take a horse rider and we take a runner, and they've both got an ankle sprain. Now, obviously, the biology of an ankle sprain, you've torn a ligament to, let's say they've just done it to the same degree of severity. You're going to rehab both of them differently, because one is to get back onto the horse, the other one is to get back to running. So you can't give both of them the same exercise plan, the same training plan, the same rehab plan, because what they're trying to achieve, their goal, for a better word, is completely different.
absolutely. So just wanted to move on to the next question I had, which is based around like demands, load, and fatigue. And I think we'll come at this from an action and adventure sports point of view. From what you see clinically and personally, like where do these action and adventure sports athletes tend to break down first? And what usually caused it, like long before symptoms appeared?
It's a difficult question, but I'll try and give you the quickest answer.
Yeah.
It all depends on what that person is trying to achieve. What are they doing, and to what degree they're doing it? You know, there's different. If we're going from an actual, you know, give me a sport. Give me what sport or sports are you thinking
Okay,
about?
so that's the Winter Olympics are just about to wrap up, and we've been watching the snowboarding half pipe really intensely because we love the Scotty James story and the journey he's been on. So let's use that as an example.
Yeah. So again, it's all about you fit and strong enough for purpose. That's the bottom line. If you're someone who's looking at, you see Scotty James and you want to emulate that, you want to go after that, you see that as something you want to achieve, and you know he's a bit of a hero for you. Again, it's the case of what are the steps that I need to do to get there. It's not the case of jumping the gun and trying to basically run before you can walk, or in his terms, be the case of attempting a half pipe before you can even snowboard. Yeah,
Yes.
that would be the easiest way to break it down. So it's understanding that to get to where you want to go, it's a journey. And it doesn't matter whether you're a professional or whether you're an amateur. If you just, if you just want to go snowboarding, you know, the first steps are your knees strong enough? Are your ankles strong enough? The technique. Have you learnt enough of it? Do you need a coach to teach you the technique? Have you got a strength and conditioning coach to give you the plan to get strong enough? So from a way of preparing, that's the mindset that kind of needs to develop. And unfortunately, normally, you know, everybody tries to run before they can walk, yeah, or jog. It's understanding that, and that comes with experience, that comes with trial and error within especially within the world of extreme sport. There is a lot of trial and error because, as the name suggests, it's extreme. You know, you're trying things that may never have been done before. But again, if you're looking at the elite end of things, are you strong enough that if it doesn't go right, that you are able to bounce back without needing 6 weeks off for a ligament injury or a muscle injury, or at worst, 3 months off because you've broken a bone? That's what you got to be looking at.
Yeah, sure. That makes complete sense. And that's why our training progressions are tiered in a pyramid format, where you have to lay the basics and layer them up before you can get to the high power, high speed, sexy looking training at the top. And you could jump there quickly, but you're probably not going to stay there for long.
This is it. But also, what needs to be considered as well is that, as you said, you've got, you've said really nicely, you've got that tiered approach with the training, how to get there. And I'm definitely not saying that it's got to be holistic. It has to be. You could have 5 different athletes all going for the same. Let's just use the half pipe again as an example. You've got 5 different athletes, all of whom who want to get to that point. They're all going to have different starting points.
Yeah.
So let's say you've got a system in mind, which is 5 tiers. Well, you could have someone that comes in and they're already at tier 3 because they've got the natural ability they've got good strength, they've got an athletic background. So you're not starting them from zero. And that again comes with the person who's setting the program to understand that you can't start everybody at tier 5. Yeah, there could be people coming at tier 4, tier 3, potentially even tier 2 if they have experience with snowboarding. They know themselves on the half pipe, but they want to try a new trick. Then you've got to give them the plan to make them strong enough And again, it's about not being linear. You have to be able to bounce back when things don't go right.
Yeah,
Within
absolutely.
extreme sports, that's the way it's got to go. You're going to be doing things that are incredible, that are crazy, that no one's ever done before, or you're trying to emulate someone that's done it before to get past them, and have you got the strength to sustain it if it goes wrong? Because if it goes right, you've done it right,
Yeah,
your
sure.
ankle's in the right place, your knee's in the right place. But if it goes wrong, have you got the ability to not be linear, but you've got that diverse aspect to being able to bounce back?
There's so many variables with this, and we see it all the time. And you could have someone who's younger with a higher training age than someone who's older with a younger training age. The three things, and I know we've had conversations about this countless times before, the three main things we try to focus on, or I do when working with these athletes, is how good is their movement, their natural movement? How well can they produce force? So how strong are they? And how well can they apply that force? So how powerful and fast can they move? And it's usually a strength in that paradigm and a weakness. And for us, it's about trying to maintain those strengths, but also focus on those weaknesses as well. So the whole system's kind of organically evolving like a ripple, and it's balanced. And that's the key thing we find. If there's an imbalance somewhere, it's where it tends to break down.
Agreed. Completely agree. And again, it's finding that imbalance, if there is one, or where it may be.
Yeah.
So absolutely agree with that.
So in terms of training reality, what training or preparation mistakes do you repeatedly see with action and endurance athletes that leads to an injury or like recurring issues, even in athletes that appear to be fit?
Probably say, as someone who loves their sport as well, like yourself, it's the case of everybody wants to get back as quickly as possible. And I completely understand that. I completely support that. But it's making sure that you're getting back in the fastest and safest way. So from a rehab approach, there's a reason that some things need a timeline.
Yeah, sure.
And it's respecting those timelines. Although, as I've said before, and I'll say again, my approach to physiotherapy is incredibly holistic. One injury, even if they're the same, and I've got 5 different people, everybody gets back at a different rate. And I will always, from my own personal sort of professional opinion, I'll always get you back as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible. With regards to your question in terms of training reality, where do I see that potentially going wrong? I see it going wrong when you're not necessarily doing return to sport specific for the sport that the athlete does. So a good example of that would be, let's take a trail runner, someone who likes running trails on the weekend. Brilliant. Like, you've got them back. Let's say again, they've had an ankle or knee injury and you've got them back. They're running pain-free on treadmill. They're running pain-free on the treadmill with an incline. But you haven't tested them on an uneven surface.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't tested them when they're in fatigue running on an uneven surface. And it's those little things that just need to be kept in mind when returning to sport.
Yeah, sure.
It's is the body, and again, it goes back to what we said earlier with regards to training for the unpredictable. Yeah. Is the body able to respond to an environment which it wasn't planning to respond to?
Absolutely.
And that equates to every sport.
Yeah, sure.
Every sport has elements where it can go wrong. Yeah. And is the body strong enough to cope with those? It's not whether the body is able to run well. That's always achievable. I say always. 95%, 99% of the time, that's always achievable, depending on the injury. It's getting them ready for the environment in which they're running in, or training in or competing in.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there with that word environment, because it has to be environment specific.
Absolutely.
Most foundations can be generic and they can apply to, multifaceted sports or multifaceted movements or actions.
Yep.
But if you really want to then excel or accelerate your development or your rehab, the specificity needs to be based around the environment. I completely agree with that. That's a really good point. It's something we often see people miss.
Yeah.
And that tends to accelerate the breakdown or delay the development.
Yep. And I think another thing to go with that, with training reality, or, in other words, sort of rehab reality, if you want, getting back to training, is a lot of people wait until they are 100% sort of pain-free, cleared before they attempt the sport. So there's that element of they've done the rehab for 6 weeks. They're in the gym. They're doing everything by the book, perfect. Everything's set. And then once those 6 weeks are up, they're straight back into training again, full time, flat out. When actually, if you just blend those two realities, you've got your rehab reality, your training reality, and instead of doing, you keep out the 6 weeks of strengthening, rehabilitation in the gym, training with the S&C coach in the gym as well for 6 weeks. But let's say at week 4 of those 6 weeks, that's when you start to train again. But you train with coach in a modified held back variety. You're building up your training as you're building up the load in the gym, so that when you've done your 6 weeks in the gym, you're going into your training again, having done 2 weeks of sort of, in a way, pre-training, and then you're into training. That again reduces the load. So there's lots of different ways that it can be approached.
Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating topic, and it's one I feel is never going to stay still. It's so many moving parts to each individual situation and scenario.
100%.
And that's why people can't expect to get a great solution from I suppose, an average approach.
Absolutely. It's finding that holistic approach to get them back to where they need to get to. And that is a conversation, that is the communication that needs to be held open between the athlete or the person with the injury, their therapist, their SC coach, and their coach. Yeah. And obviously, if you haven't got all four, let's say you're more of a sort of weekend warrior, you're training solo, then it's the communication you got to have with your physio, your osteo, or whoever the therapist is. Or if you haven't got a physio and you're working with an SC coach, again, it's all about having the communication and knowing what they're getting back to.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is something we see time and time again. So it's easier for those more elite athletes to have that group or team communication structure because they tend to be in the same place at the same time more often. And everyone's equally invested in that combined outcome. Whereas with the more recreational style athletes or individual athletes, maybe performing at a lower level, they may all have those different people that they can access, but it's, they're not in the same place at the same time. So you almost have to act as your own manager to bring all those pieces together. And it's no surprise to sometimes that, the some jigsaw puzzle pieces can get lost, and therefore the progress might be slower because the communication isn't there. So it's an ongoing challenge. Just to move on to kind of durability versus rehab, and you've kind of already alluded to this, I think, but like, where do you see the biggest gap between traditional rehab approaches and what athletes actually need, specifically to return more durable than before?
I think that there's lots of different ways to look at this, but if you're looking at your traditional rehab, and I don't want to generalize what traditional rehab is, because I think there's a lot of different people say lots of different things about traditional rehab, but generally speaking, in my opinion, traditional rehab can often focus on sort of reducing the pain, restoring range of motion, and sort of maybe building just isolated sort of compound strength. Whilst sport demands, again, as we said earlier, repeated exposure to high load, unpredictable movements, and unpredictable environments, depending on the sport. And again, I think the biggest gap lies in the capacity that the athlete has. So yes, once they're cleared and their symptoms have resolved, do they have the capacity to go back to that environment or to that level of environment safely? So I think that's where, again, what is traditional rehab? Fine. I've summed it up with sort of reducing pain, resolving pain, restoring range of motion, and building strength. But I think that, again, if you're looking at what needs to be done, it's all about just having that holistic approach.
Yeah, sure.
What does the person need to get back to? What is their aim? What is their goal? And what is their goal beyond getting back to where they were? Are they happy with where they were? Do they want to achieve more? What level are they at? And at the end of the day, also what's realistic. And that's a conversation to be had with the patient, with the athlete, because they know what they want to do. They know what they want to get to, and it's down to us to get them there.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And this goes way beyond the gym and the treatment room. because there's so many other aspects of lifestyle, like in the bedroom when you're sleeping, in the kitchen when you're eating, etc., that may have much more of an effect on the current status quo than people realize. And the rehab process might actually be quite simple. However, they are making it take longer or delaying it because they're almost anchoring it down with their negative lifestyle approach, which is a completely different topic. But that, again, it's something, it's food for thought, forgive the pun, but food for thought really, because we often find that happens, and just simple tweaks to people's lifestyle can almost take the handbrake off the length of time it takes them to get back to full fitness.
And again, this is something that you can discuss with obviously if they open up about it and there's other things going on, it needs to be considered. Obviously, if you're a full-time athlete, your life, you're in a fantastic position to kind of focus on training and really get in there, and you've got the time to recover more potentially than someone who's got a job working alongside their sport if they're not fully funded, to someone who's potentially got a family, you've got children. There's other things that need to be thought of, absolutely, when it comes to looking outside of the plan that's been set with regards to the physiotherapy, the training that's been set for that individual, 100%. And I think that also you've got to be realistic when it comes to setting these programs, when it comes to looking outside of that, because you can't expect someone to be in the gym for an hour when all they've got is half an hour.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I talk an awful lot with my patients about is, realistically, look, I can give you a 10-minute plan. I can give you a 20-minute plan. I can give you an hour plan, but you need to guide me as to what will work for you, because I don't want to set you up for failure and say, right, get in the gym and I need you to be there for 90 minutes. That's completely unrealistic. It's just like giving someone 30 stretches to do every night, or there's an exaggeration, let's say 10 stretches every night. Even 10 stretches, if done properly, can take up to half an hour. You're not going to have time, realistically, having a life to do that. Yeah. And again, I think, to be fair, even those who are professional athletes may struggle having to do that amount of work when it comes to rehab. So it's all about making the program holistic for the patient, for the performer, for the athlete, whoever they may be, so that you're helping them with their lifestyle as well.
Absolutely. And it comes back to what we just spoke about. That jigsaw piece puzzle has to fit. And
Absolutely.
if it doesn't fit, the problem's not going to really get solved. And most things when it comes to training and sports performance are only as effective if they get done.
Absolutely.
And to giving someone or prescribing someone something, same for us. If we're going to prescribe a strength and conditioning program for somebody, it has to look and feel and fit into their lifestyle.
100%. 100%.
Just to move on to next question. I mean, again, I feel like you've alluded to some of these points already, but is there anything that you believed early in your career about performance and training that you now have changed your mind about or see differently?
Physiotherapy changes all the time. Yeah, there's new guidelines coming out every year on how best to treat an injury or what not to do to treat an injury. So it's ever evolving. Is there something sort of with my experience that I believed earlier in my career to where I am now? I'm constantly learning. I could never say I've seen everything. Every year I get to see an injury that I'd read about, and suddenly you're like, okay, we've got to come at this from a different point of view. This is new, and create a solution to the problem. And so for that reason, the answer to that is no. Have I learned? All I know is that one size does not fit all. Yeah, that's the most important thing. And I think that treatment has to be holistic. You've got to look at the person as a whole. You've got to look at them not just from the injury point of view. You've got to look at them from where they want to go, from where they've been, where they are. So you're taking everything into consideration when it comes to building their program of rehab from a physio point of view, and building their program from a strength and conditioning side of things from yourself, for the extreme sports performance or whatever sport that they are building towards or training at or competing at.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the same for us. And there's always going to be those underlying foundations, which the building blocks are just, rarely going to change. And then there's always going to be new ways of doing things based on research. And then there's going to be that sport specificity as well. And we like to approach things with a blend of all of those three, and also the personality of the person that we are working with as well. It has to be factored into, and it's never going to be perfect. But I think if you consider all of those four things, and based on what you've said, like that's a good approach, specifically for the nature and the culture of action sports and adventure sports too. If it's a more traditional kind of linear sport, then it might not need to be so broadly approached. But in the environments we find ourselves a lot, and that's really key and important.
The thing as well is that when you're coming at it, if you're looking at it from an extreme sports performance, from your trail running, your skiing, you could name a lot more sports, your wakeboarding, your water skiing, etc. You want to also, that program is quite specialist knowledge. You need to have someone who can give you a program to, as we've discussed, prepare you for the unpreparable. Yeah. You can't go to necessarily a traditional or just your sport, your strength and conditioning coach for your traditional sports, let's say. Yeah. Because they're so specialist, you want to have the training in your program to build for that, to make sure that you can take the impact. You are able and you are prepared for when things do go wrong, because you can't have a program for running if you're doing trail running, because you've got to build the strength in your ankles to prepare for an uneven surface, the tree root that you didn't see, so that you don't roll your ankle and the race is over. You've got the ability to fight that. The body's got the strength to protect you so that, yes, you may roll it, but nowhere near to the severity it was before, and you can continue running. It's that's the mindset that I think the sort of your target audience should adapt to get themselves ready for whatever they want to prepare for.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Now, thanks for sharing that. And there is just to kind of rewind slightly to that example you gave, like a running program will help a trail runner.
Absolutely.
Only up to a certain
faster.
Point. Yeah.
100%. But there's that little element of, work on a Bosu ball. Would a runner ever do work on a Bosu ball? Probably not. Yeah. And if they are, very impressed.
Yeah.
And again, there's so many exercises you can do on that, or again with other equipment in the gym, to protect yourself.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Obviously, a marathon runner wouldn't have to do that because they're running on a flat surface. They're on the road. It's fine. Yeah. So again,
absolutely. And that's why we have, with our progressions, we have a developmental side and a dynamic side. And we always start with that developmental foundation. But then once that's achieved and repeatable, that's where the dynamic side of things come in. And that's usually where the sport specificity sits. Just to move on to a last couple of questions for you. Looking at this through kind of a world-class filter, from your perspective, what separates athletes who stay available and progressing from those who kind of cycle through injury and rehab?
I think it's a difficult question because, again, as I've said, everybody is different. When you're looking at world-class performance and you're working with athletes that, they're going to the Olympics, they want to go to the World Championships for their respective sports. I'm sure you've got your experience and I've got my experience, but those that end up getting injured time and time again, you could say that, again, they're just getting back to sport or trying to get back too soon. But it's difficult because it's like a double-edged sword, because you've also got to look at it from the athlete's point of view. When you're performing to that level, you've got to be available for selection. Selection can be once, twice, maybe 3 times a year. If you're injured for selection, or you're not training hard enough up to selection, then you're not going to get selected, then you're not going to get paid, then you're not going to get funding, then you're out of, your self-funding for the sport. So there's an awful lot of pressure on professional athletes to stay fit and be available for selection, for their obviously for the competition, because the competitions you get your funding based on the results that you get. There's so many, and I know I've gone off on a tangent here, but to answer your question, yes, generally speaking, you could say that the athletes that get injured more often than others or get stuck in a cycle of injury, it's because they want to get back sooner than their body is able to get them back for. However, normally when that occurs, it's because there's a bit of time pressure for them to get back for a specific date. So, yeah, that would be my answer to that. But
Okay.
again, from a physio point of view, I always try very hard, and touch wood, thankfully, that I haven't experienced that much.
It is a difficult question to ask, and yeah, sorry to kind of force you down that generic route of response, but it is tricky. And again, we find the same challenges as well.
Absolutely.
Again, everything
Absolutely.
we're talking about here crosses over with what we previously discussed about, your lifestyle, your recovery, your fitness. They're all like multifaceted elements of your performance, and it's difficult to pick out one specific thing, right?
And this is exactly it. It's you need, if you are injured or you are training, again, it's making sure that the program for your training or the therapist that you're seeing for your rehabilitation is listening to you as a whole. They're not just
Mm.
looking at the injury, if that makes sense. They're not just looking at, if you've gone to, you'd be able to give a better example, but you're not just going to a strength and conditioning coach and you're saying, right, I need to get stronger knees. Okay, well, here's your program. It's why. Again, they've come to me for physiotherapy. They've hurt their shoulder. Okay, how? Explain to me, what you're getting back to. What level, what's your life at? Going down all those different facets, as you said, to understand them as a person and to understand what they want to get out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a conversation that we could have for hours and still not probably come up with an answer. But that's a good summary, and I'm sure the listeners would appreciate that.
And again,
Response.
the key thing is that I think the main thing to take away from this conversation is that there is no one size fits all. It has to be holistic. Anything to do with training, doesn't matter what age you are. We could go off on a complete tangent and talk about under 18s. You're looking at junior athletes, especially with the junior athletes. Everybody's developing at such a different rate. You could have a child that at the age of 12 isn't as developed as the other children, but by the age of 18 is taller, bigger, and stronger than all of them.
Yeah, sure.
And your training program for when they are 12, 13, 14, 15, it needs to be different. You can't give a one size fits all, especially to those developing children, because it's not going to be applicable. If you're going to give a program for someone who's really big and has developed a lot at quite a young age, giving them a simple training program, you're holding them back. You want to progress them more. Whereas if you were to give a progressive program to someone that hasn't developed much, then you're going to set them up for failure because they're never going to achieve it.
Absolutely.
So the same principle, although obviously, we're fully grown, and by the time you're an adult, you've kind of set your height is what it's going to be. Again, when it comes to your strength, you've got to look at, are they more a fast twitch? Are they more slow twitch? What are they training for? Again, is it fast twitch? Is it slow twitch? And making the program specific for them for what they want to get back to.
Absolutely. We've both and still both do work with a lot of youth athletes in various sports, and we see what you've just said all the time. And the key thing I think I'm finding is those athletes with a lower training age, or who might be on the slightly later side of development, not possibly as mesomorphic as their counterparts. They're looking for, I suppose, shortcuts, or what they would categorize as a more exciting way to train. It's not necessarily the better option, and a lot of it is for me, is the three-pronged approach of education, support, and coaching, and continually coming around to cycling around those three things. Usually, one, when it comes to young athletes, they'll need one more than the other at a specific time.
Absolutely.
They may need more coaching, they may need more support, but in our experience, they always need education.
Yes.
But it changes as they develop and as they change. And the other thing is, they might not just do one sport; they might be doing 5 sports. So it's
Absolutely.
so many moving parts to it. Just to wrap up, Nico, thank you so much for your time. We've loved having you on the show. Do you have a kind of a key takeaway message to our core audience of action and adventure sports athletes and coaches, specifically about kind of if they are in a place where they're struggling with a long-term injury or pain, what could they do to help move forwards?
I think that when it comes to training, your input needs to equal your output. So that'd be my probably my biggest message. That look, if you're training 6 days a week, what are you doing for recovery? Because the body will eventually break, and it doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter gender. It doesn't matter. The body will break if the recovery doesn't match the input, the training that you're doing. So that would be my biggest takeaway message. And then to follow on to that, it's what are you doing for recovery? So, and again, that very much depends on, I could sit here and whittle through all sorts of types of recoveries, but it very much depends on where you're feeling the niggle, what sport you're doing, what muscles you're using predominantly, and kind of going from there. If there is, with your listeners, if they are struggling with an injury, I'd always say, look, try and fix it yourself. My biggest thing would be rest doesn't solve anything. I've never told any of my patients to rest ever. And that's the one thing they can probably quote from me is that it's all about active rest. Resting an injury doesn't make it go away. All you're doing is avoiding the aggravating factor. You're not doing anything to resolve the issue. And I think that's the biggest bit of education I'd probably want to give on your podcast, along with what I said earlier about the recovery. Mm-hmm. So again, if they're not sure what they can be doing, without wanting to promote the Physiotherapy Society or osteopaths around the UK or chiropractors or whatever, I'd recommend getting expert advice and finding a physiotherapist, as I've mentioned before, other therapists. And I'd go on recommendation personally. It's always the best way to get the advice or the expertise that you need is going off recommendations that friends and family may say, go see them. They're good at what they do. That'd be my advice. So again, going with your 3-pronged approach of education, support, and coaching.
Brilliant. Great response. And it depends on where people are based, right? And if they're 2 hours away from a brilliant physio, is that really going to help them? Maybe not.
This is it. And again, it all depends on the severity of the injury. If you've had something which is chronic, chances are you've probably done everything already. So my first protocol would be, have you had hands-on treatment? There's so many different ways. As I said, I have learned and developed so many different tools to try and treat problems in hundreds of different ways so that there's hopefully always a solution to the same injury, which present differently with different people. So it's just a case of finding what works for you.
Brilliant. What a great way to wrap up this fascinating discussion. Thanks again for your time.
No, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. And if people want to get in touch with you, Nico, what is the best way they can do that?
Best way to do that is I have 2 clinics, one in Hammersmith and one near Reading. So best way to do that would be either my website, which is NKS Physio, and sending me an email and going from there. Instagram as well is another way to do it, but probably the website would be the best way forward.
Brill. Well, for everyone listening, I'll put those links Nico's mentioned directly in the show notes. But Nico, thanks again, and I hope you have a brilliant rest of 2026. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If this conversation was useful, a rating and review on your listening platform helps more athletes and coaches access practical real-world performance insights. If you know someone training hard, navigating fatigue, or dealing with inconsistency or recurring breakdown, share this episode with them. For more applied performance education, tools and coaching support, visit extremesportsperformance.com and follow us on Instagram and YouTube. Remember to train with intent, recover with purpose, and build performance that lasts. Until next time, go well and release your limits.